It's the mornings after the spider and heights dreams that are the most painful. That it takes sometimes 3 coffees and 2 showers and sometimes a run to loosen the grip on his soul's throat. And these post-dream mornings are even worse if he wakes up unalone. If the previous night's subject is still there, wanting to twitter or to cuddle and like spoon, asking what exactly is the story with the foggy inverted tumblers on the bathroom floor, commenting on his night sweats, clattering around in the kitchen, making kippers or bacon or something even more hideous and unhoneyed he's supposed to eat with post-coital male gusto. The ones who have this thing about, they call it, feeding my man, wanting a man who can barely keep down AM honey toast to eat with male gusto, elbows out and shoveling, making little noises. Even when alone, able to uncurl alone and sit up slowly and wring out the sheet and go to the bathroom, these darkest mornings start days that Orrin can't even bring himself for hours to think about how he'll get through the day. These worst mornings with cold floors and hot windows and merciless light. The soul's certainty that the day will have to be not traversed but sort of climbed vertically, and then that going to sleep again at the end of it will be like falling again off something tall and sheer. So now his own eye mucus is secure in the desert southwest, but the bad dreams have gotten worse since the trade to this blasted area himself had fled long ago as an unhappy youngster. As a nod to Orrin's own unhappy youth, all the dreams seem to open briefly with some sort of competitive tennis situation. Last night's it started with a wide-angle shot of Orrin on a hard-true court, waiting to receive serve from someone vague, some academy person. Ross Reet, maybe, or good old M. Bain, or gray-toothed Walt Fletchett, now a teaching pro in the Carolinas. When the dream's screen tightens on him and abruptly dissolves to the blank dark rose color of eyes closed against bright light, and there's the ghastly feeling of being submerged and not knowing which way to head for the surface and air. And after some interval, the dreams Orrin struggles up from this kind of visual suffocation to find his mother's head. Mrs. Avril M. T. Incandence's, the mom's disconnected head, attached face to his own fine head, strapped tight to his face somehow by a wraparound system of VS, high-pro, top-shelf, lamb-gut string from his Academy racket's own face. So that no matter how frantically Orrin tries to move his head or shake it side to side or twist up his face or roll his eyes, he's still staring at, into, and somehow through his mother's face. As if the mom's head was some sort of overtight helmet Orrin can't wrestle his way out of.
2.
In the dream, it's understandably vital to Orrin that he disengage his head from this phylactery-ish bind of his mother's disembodied head, and he cannot. Last night's subject's note indicates that at some point last night, Orrin had clutched her head with both hands and tried to sort of stiff-arm her, though not in an ungentle or complaining way. The note, not the stiff-arm. The apparent amputation of Mom's head from the rest of the Mom's appears in the dream to be clean and surgically neat. There is no evidence of a stump or any kind of nubbin of neck, even. And it is as if the base of the round, pretty head had been sealed and also sort of rounded off so that her head is a large living ball, a globe with a face attached to his own head's face. The subject after Bain's sister, but before the one just before this one, with the ambush scent and the hearts over eyes. The previous subject had been a sallowly pretty Arizona State developmental psychology grad student with 2 kids and outrageous alimony and pensions for sharp jewelry, refrigerated chocolate, interlace educational cartridges, and professional athletes who thrashed in their sleep. Not real bright. She thought the figure he'd trace without thinking on her bare flank after sex was the numeral 8, to give you an idea. Their last morning together, right before he'd mailed her child an expensive toy and then had his phone number changed, he'd awakened from a night of horror show dreams, woke up with an abrupt fetal spasm, unrefreshed and benighted of soul, his eyes wobbling and his wet silhouette on the bottom sheet like a coroner's chalk outline. He woke to find the subject up and sitting up against the reading pillow, wearing his sleeveless academy sweatshirt and sipping hazelnut espresso and watching, on the cartridge viewing system that occupied half the bedroom's south wall, something horrific called Interlace Educational Cartridges in conjunction with CBC Educational Programming Matrix presents Schizophrenia, Mind or Body. And it had to lie there, moist and paralyzed, curled fetal on his own sweat shadow, and watch on the viewer a pale young guy about Hal's age, with copper stubble and a red cowlick and flat, blank, effectless black doll's eyes, stare into space stage left, while a brisk Albertan voiceover explained that Fenton here was a dyed-in-the-wool paranoid schizophrenic who believed that radioactive fluids were invading his skull and that hugely complex high-tech type machines had been specially designed and programmed to pursue him without cease until they caught him and made brutal sport of him and buried him alive. It was an old, late millennial CBC public interest Canadian news documentary, digitally sharpened and re-disseminated under the Interlace imprimatur. Interlace could get kind of seedy and low rent during early morning off hours in terms of spontaneous disseminations. And so, but since the old CBC documentary's thesis was turning out pretty clearly to be schizophrenia body, the voiceover evinced great clipped good cheer as it explained that, well, yes, poor old Fenton here was more or less hopeless as an extra-institutional functioning unit, but that, on the upside, science could at least give his existence some sort of meaning by studying him very carefully to help learn how schizophrenia manifested itself in the human body's brain. That, in other words, with the aid of cutting-edge positron emission topography, or PET technology, since supplanted wholly by invasive digitals, Oren hears the developmental psychology graduate student mutter to herself, watching rapt over her cup, unaware that Oren's paralytically awake. They could scan and study how different parts of poor old Fenton's dysfunctional brain emitted positrons in a whole different topography than your average hale and hearty, non-delusional, God-fearing Albertan's brain. Advancing science by injecting test subject Fenton here with a special blood-brain barrier penetrating radioactive dye, and then sticking him in the rotating body-sized receptacle of a PET scanner. On the viewer, it's an enormous gray metal machine that looks like something co-designed by James Cameron and Fritz Lang. And now have a look at this Fenton fellow's eyes as he starts to get the gist of what the voiceover is saying. And in a terse old public TV cut, they now showed subject Fenton in 5-point canvas restraints whipping his copper-haired head from side to side as guys in mint green surgical masks and caps inject him with radioactive fluids through a turkey baster-sized syringe. Then, good old Fenton's eyes bugging out in total foreseen horror as he's rolled toward the huge gray PET device and slid like an unrisen loaf into the thing's open maw until only his decay-colored sneakers are in view. And the body-sized receptacle rotates the test subject counterclockwise with brutal speed so that the old sneakers point up and then left and then down and then right and then up faster and faster. The machine's blurps and tweets not even coming close to covering Fenton's entombed howls as his worst delusional fears came true in digital stereo, and you could hear the last surviving bits of his functional, dye-permeated mind being screamed out of him for all time as the viewer digitally superimposed an image of Fenton's ember-red and neutron-blue brain in the lower right corner, where Interlace's time-temp functions usually appear, and the brisk voiceover gave capsule histories of first paranoid schizophrenia, and then PET. With Oren lying there, slit-eyed, wet and neuralgic, with AM dread, wishing the subject would put her own clothes and sharp jewelry on and take the rest of her Toblerone out of the freezer and go, so he could go to the bathroom and get yesterday's asphyxiated roaches into an EWD dumpster before the dumpster's all filled for the day, and decide what kind of expensive present to mail the subject's kid. And then, the matter of the dead bird, out of nowhere. And then, news of pressure from the AZ Cardinal administration to cooperate with some sort of insipid-type personality profile series of interviews with some profiler from Moment magazine, with personal, backgroundish questions to be answered in some blandly sincere, team PR way, the unexamined stress of which drives him to start calling Haley again. Reopen that whole Pandora's box of worms. Orrin also shaves in the shower, face red with heat, wreathed in steam, by feel, shaving upward with south to north strokes as he was taught. Year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. Here's Hal Incandenza, age 17, with his little brass one-hitter, getting covertly high in the Enfield Tennis Academy's underground pump room and exhaling palely into an industrial exhaust fan. It's the sad little interval after afternoon matches and conditioning, but before the Academy's communal supper. Hal is by himself down here, and nobody knows where he is or what he's doing. Hal likes to get high in secret, but a bigger secret is that he's as attached to the secrecy as he is to getting high. A one-hitter, sort of like a long FDR-type cigarette holder whose end is packed with a pinch of good dope, gets hot and is hard on the mouth, the brass ones especially, but one-hitters have the advantage of efficiency. Every particle of ignited pot gets inhaled. There's none of the incidental second-hand type smoke from a party bowl's big load, and Hal can take every iota way down deep and hold his breath forever, so that even his exhalations are no more than slightly pale and sick, sweet-smelling. Total utilization of available resources equals lack of publicly detectable waste. The Academy's tennis court's lungs pump room is underground and accessible only by tunnel. ETA is abundantly, embranchingly, tunneled. This is by design. Plus, one-hitters are small, which is good because, let's face it, anything you use to smoke high-resin dope with is going to stink. A bong is big, and its stink is going to be like commensurately big. Plus, you have the foul bong water to deal with. Pipes are smaller and at least portable, but they always come with only a multi-hit party bowl that disperses non-utilized smoke over a wide area. A one-hitter can be wastelessly employed, then allowed to cool, wrapped in 2 baggies, and then further wrapped and sealed in a Ziploc, and then enclosed in 2 sport socks, in a gear bag along with the lighter, and eye drops, and mint pellets, and the little film case of dope itself, and it's highly portable and odor-free, and basically totally covert. As far as Hal knows, colleagues Michael Pemulus, Jim Struck, Bridget C. Boone, Jim Troeltsch, Ted Schacht, Trevor Axford, and possibly Kyle D. Coyle, and Tall Paul Shaw, and remotely, possibly, Franny Unwin, all know Hal gets regularly, covertly high. It's also not impossible that Bernadette Longley knows, actually. And of course, the unpleasant Kay Freer always has suspicions of all kinds. And Hal's brother Mario knows a thing or two, but that's it, in terms of public knowledge. But even though Pemulus and Struck and Boone and Troeltsch and Axford, and occasionally, in a sort of medicinal and touristic way, Stice and Schacht, all are known to get high also, Hal has actually gotten actively high only with Pemulus, on the rare occasions he's gotten high with anybody else, as in person, which he avoids. He'd forgot. Ortho the Darkness Stice of Partridge, Kansas knows. And Hal's oldest brother, Orrin, mysteriously, even long distance, seems to know more than he's coming right out and saying, unless Hal's reading more into some of the phone comments than are there. Hal's mother, Mrs. Avril Incandenza, and her adoptive brother, Dr. Charles Tavis, the current ETA headmaster, both know Hal drinks alcohol sometimes, like on weekend nights with Troeltsch or maybe Axford, down the hill at clubs on Commonwealth Avenue. The Unexamined Life has its notorious blind bouncer night every Friday, where they card you on the honor system. Mrs. Averill Incandenza isn't crazy about the idea of Hal drinking, mostly because of the way his father had drunk when alive, and reportedly his father's own father before him in Arizona and California. But Hal's academic precocity, and especially his late competitive success on the junior circuit, make it clear that he's able to handle whatever modest amounts she's pretty sure he consumes. There's no way someone can seriously abuse a substance and perform at top, scholarly, and athletic levels. The ETA psych counselor Dr. Rusk assures her, especially the high-level athletic part. And Averill feels it's important that a concerned but unsmothering single parent know when to let go somewhat and let the two high-functioning of her 3 sons make their own possible mistakes and learn from their own valid experience, no matter how much the secret worry about mistakes tears her gizzard out. The mothers. And Charles supports whatever personal decisions she makes in conscience about her children. And God knows she'd rather have Hal having a few glasses of beer every so often than absorbing God alone knows what sort of esoteric designer compounds with reptilian Michael Pemulus and trail of slime-leaving James Struck, both of whom give Averill a howling case of the maternal phantods. And ultimately, she's told Doctors Rusk and Tavis, she'd rather have Hal abide in the security of the knowledge that his mother trusts him, that she's trusting and supportive and doesn't judge or gizzard tear or wring her fine hands over his having, for instance, a glass of Canadian ale with friends every now and again, and so works tremendously hard to hide her maternal dread of his possibly ever drinking like James himself, or James's father. All so that Hal might enjoy the security of feeling that he can be upfront with her about issues like drinking, and not feel he has to hide anything from her under any circumstances. Dr. Tavis and Dolores Rusk have privately discussed the fact that, not least among the phobic stressors Averill suffers so uncomplainingly with, is a black phobic dread of hiding or secrecy in all possible forms with respect to her sons. Averill and CT know nothing about Hal's penchants for high-resin Bob Hope and underground absorption, which fact Hal obviously likes a lot on some level, though he's never given much thought to why he likes it so much. ETA's hilltop grounds are traversable by tunnel. Averill I, for example, who never leaves the grounds anymore, rarely travels above ground, willing to hunch to take the off-tunnels between Headmaster's house and her office next to Charles Tavis's in the Community and Administration Building. A pink-bricked, white-pillared, neo-Georgian thing that Hal's brother Mario says looks like a cube that has swallowed a bowl too big for its stomach.
3.
2 sets of elevators and 1 of stairs run between the lobby, reception area, and administrative offices on ComEd's first floor and the weight room, sauna, and locker shower areas on the sublevel below it. 1 large tunnel of elephant-colored cement leads from just off the boys' showers to the mammoth laundry room below the west courts, and 2 smaller tunnels radiate from the sauna area south and east to the sub-basements of the smaller, sphero-cubular, proto-Georgian buildings, housing classrooms and sub-dormitories B and D. These 2 basements and smaller tunnels often serve as student storage space and hallways between various pro-rectors' private rooms.
4.
Then 2 even smaller tunnels, navigable by any adult willing to assume a kind of knuckle-dragging simian posture, in turn connect each of the sub-basements to the former optical and film development facilities of Leith and Ogilvy, and the late Dr. James O. Incandenza, now deceased, below and just west of the headmaster's house. From which facilities there's also a fair diameter tunnel that goes straight to the lowest level of the Community and Administration Building. But its functions have gradually changed over 4 years, and it's now too full of exposed wiring and hot water pipes and heating ducts to be really passable. And to the offices of the physical plant, almost directly beneath the center row of ETA outdoor tennis courts, which offices and custodial lounge are in turn connected to ETA's lung storage and pump rooms via a pargeted tunnel hastily constructed by the Testar All-Weather Inflatable Structures Corp., which together, with the folks over at the ATH-SCME, Industrial Air Displacement Devices, erects and services the inflatable dendrourethane dome, known as the Lung, that covers the middle row of courts for the winter indoor season. The crude little rough-sided tunnel between plant and pump is traversable only via all-fours type crawling and is essentially unknown to staff and administration, popular only with the Academy's smaller kids' tunnel club, as well as with certain adolescents with strong secret incentive to crawl on all fours. The lung storage room is basically impassable from March through November because it's full of intricately folded dendrourethane lung material and dismantled sections of flexible ducting and fan blades, etc. The pump room is right next to it, though you have to crawl back out into the tunnel to get to it. On the engineering diagrams, the pump rooms may be about 20 meters directly beneath the centermost courts in the middle row of courts, and looks like a kind of spider hanging upside down. An unfenestrated oval chamber with 6 man-sized, curved ducts radiating up and out to exit points on the grounds above. And the pump room has 6 radial openings, one for each upcurving duct. 3 2-meter vents with huge turbine-bladed exhaust fans bolted into their grills, and 3 more 2Ms with reversed ATH-SCME intake fans that allow air from the ground above to be sucked down and around the room and up into the 3 exhaust vents. The pump room is essentially like a pulmonary organ, or the epicenter of a massive 6-vectored wind tunnel, and when activated roars like a banshee that slammed its hand in a door, though the PR's in full legit operation only when the lung is up, usually November to March. The intake fans pull ground-level winter air down into and around the room and through the 3 exhaust fans and up the outtake ducts into networks of pneumatic tubing in the lung's sides and dome. It's the pressure of the moving air that keeps the fragile lung inflated. When the quartz lung is down and stored, Howe will descend and walk and then hunch his way in to make sure nobody's in the physical plant quarters. Then he'll hunch and crawl to the PR, gear bag in his teeth, and activate just one of the big exhaust fans and get secretly high and exhale palely through its blades into the vent, so that any possible odor is blown through an outtake duct and expelled through a grilled hole on the west side of the west courts, a threaded hole with a flange, where brisk, white-suited ATH-SCME guys will attach some of the lung's arterial pneumatic tubing at some point soon, when Stitt et al. On staff decide the real weather has moved past enduring for outdoor tennis. During winter months, when any expelled odor would get ducted up into the lung and hang there conspicuous, Hal mostly goes into a remote subdormitory lavatory and climbs onto a toilet in a stall and exhales into the grill of one of the little exhaust fans in the ceiling. But this routine lacks a certain intricate subterranean covert drama. It's another reason why Hal dreads Interdependence Day and the approach of the Whataburger Classic and Thanksgiving and unendurable weather and the erection of the lung. Recreational drugs are, more or less, traditional at any U.S. secondary school, maybe because of the unprecedented tensions, post-latency and puberty and angst and impending adulthood, etc., to help manage the intrapsychic storms, etc. Since the place's inception, there's always been a certain percentage of the high-caliber adolescent players at ETA who manage their internal weathers chemically. Much of this is good, clean, temporary fun, but a traditionally smaller and harder core set tends to rely on personal chemistry to manage ETA's special demands. Dexedrine or low-volt methadrine
5,
before matches, and benzodiazepines to come back down after matches.
6,
With mudslides or blue flames at some understanding Commonwealth Avenue night spot.
7,
or beers and bongs in some discreet academy corner at night to short-circuit the up and down cycle. Mushrooms or X or something from the mild designer class.
8.
Or maybe, occasionally, a little black star.
9.
Whenever there's a match and demand-free weekend, to basically short out the whole motherboard and blow out all the circuits and slowly recover and be almost neurologically reborn and start the gradual cycle all over again. This circular routine, if your basic wiring's okay to begin with, can work surprisingly well throughout adolescence and sometimes into one's like early 20s before it starts to creep up on you. But so, some ETAs, not just Hal and Cadenza by any means, are involved with recreational substances, is the point. Like who isn't at some life stage in the USA and interdependent regions in these troubled times for the most part? Though a decent percentage of ETA students aren't at all, i.e. involved. Some persons can give themselves away to an ambitious pursuit and have that be all the giving themselves away to something they need to do. Though sometimes this changes as the players get older and the pursuit more stress-fraught. American experience seems to suggest that people are virtually unlimited in their need to give themselves away on various levels. Some just prefer to do it in secret. An enrolled student-athlete's use of alcohol or illicit chemicals is cause for immediate expulsion, according to ETA's admissions catalog. But the ETA staff tends to have a lot more important stuff on its plate than policing kids who've already given themselves away to an ambitious competitive pursuit. The administrative attitude under first James Incandenza and then Charles Tavis is like, why would anybody who wanted to compromise his faculties chemically even come here to ETA, where the whole point is to stress and stretch your faculties along multiple vectors?
10.
And since it's the alumni pro-rectors who have the most direct supervisory contact with the kids, and since most of the pro-rectors themselves are depressed or traumatized about not making it into the show and having to come back to ETA and live in decent but subterranean rooms off the tunnels and work as assistant coaches and teach laughable elective classes, which is what the 8 ETA pro-rectors do when they're not off playing satellite tournaments or trying to make it through the qualifying rounds of some serious money event. And so they're morose and low on morale and feel bad about themselves often, as a rule. And so, also, not all that surprisingly, tend to get high now and then themselves, though in a less covert or exuberant fashion than the hardcore students' chemical cadre. But so, given all this, it's not hard to see why internal drug enforcement at ETA tends to be flaccid. The other nice thing about the pump room is the way it's connected by tunnel to the pro-rector's rows of housing units, which means men's rooms, which means Hal can crawl, hunch, and tiptoe into an unoccupied men's room and brush his teeth with his portable Oral-B, and wash his face, and apply eye drops and Old Spice and a plug of wintergreen Kodiak, and then saunter back to the sauna area and ascend to ground level, looking and smelling right as rain. Because when he gets high, he develops a powerful obsession with having nobody, not even the neurochemical cadre, know he's high. This obsession is almost irresistible in its force. The amount of organization and toiletry lugging he has to do to get secretly high in front of a subterranean outtake vent in the pre-supper gap would make a lesser man quail. Hal has no idea why this is, or whence this obsession with the secrecy of it. He broods on it abstractly at times, when high. This no one must know thing. It's not fear per se, fear of discovery. Beyond that, it all gets too abstract and twined up to lead to anything, Hal's brooding. Like most North Americans of his generation, Hal tends to know way less about why he feels certain ways about the objects and pursuits he's devoted to than he does about the objects and pursuits themselves. It's hard to say for sure whether this is even exceptionally bad, this tendency. At 00:15 hours, the 2nd of April, The medical attaché's wife is just leaving the Mount Auburn Total Fitness Center, having played 5 six-game pro sets in her little Mideast diplomatic wife tennis circle's weekly round robin. Then hung around the special silver key members lounge with the other ladies, unwrapping her face and hair and playing Nargis, and all smoking kif and making extremely delicate and oblique fun of their husbands' sexual idiosyncrasies, laughing softly with their hands over their mouths.
11.
The medical attaché at their apartment is still viewing the unlabeled cartridge, which he has rewound to the beginning several times, and then configured for a recursive loop. He sits there, attached to a congealed supper, watching, at 0020 hours, having now wet both his pants and the special recliner. 18, in May, Mario Incandenza's designated function around Enfield Tennis Academy is filmic. Sometimes during AM drills or PM matches, he'll be assigned by Coach Stitt et al. To set up an old camcorder, or whatever video stuff's to hand, on a tripod and record a certain area of court, videotaping different kids' strokes, footwork, certain ticks and hitches and serves or running volleys, so the staff can show the tapes to the kids instructionally, letting the kids see on the screen exactly what a coach or pro-rector's talking about. The reason being, it's a lot easier to fix something if you can see it. Autumn. Year of dairy products from the American heartland. Drug addicts, driven to crime to finance their drug addiction, are not often inclined toward violent crime. Violence requires all different kinds of energy, and most drug addicts like to expend their energy not on their professional crime, but on what their professional crime lets them afford. Drug addicts are often burglars, therefore. One reason why the home of someone whose home has been burglarized feels violated and unclean is that there have probably been drug addicts in there.